everybody for having me. I'm Greg Galant, CEO of Muck and also a co-founder of the Shorty Awards. So I'm going to talk to you today about how social media is changing everything you see now in the traditional media, how it's changing journalism, how it's changing what you read in the paper and what you see on TV. Let me first start with kind of our story of how we got here. This is what Twitter looked like when I first signed up. It was back before they could afford the vowels. And so, first of all, I think it's good just to step back and appreciate this. If you ever want to launch a website or a media property of your own, don't compare yourself to Twitter or Facebook today. Go to Internet Archive and compare yourself to what they looked like when they launched. It's much, much easier to catch up. And so I signed up really early on. I managed to get my first name on it, @Gregory. No one had grabbed it before. Thought Twitter was an awful idea, so I didn't even want to upload my real photo to it. So I took this photo of the Big Duck, which is a roadside landmark on Long Island, and stuck that there as a placeholder. From there, saw that Twitter was actually becoming a place that people wanted to post content. And there was a lot of great content on Twitter, but there was no way to know, hey, if I'm interested in news or sports or politics, who should I follow? That led us to create the Shorty Awards. When we started, we just bought the domain name, shortyawards.com. It was our $10 branding budget, which is what it cost to buy a domain name on GoDaddy. Built the website in 2 weekends, launched it, but we were the first site ever to have voting with tweets. So now everybody says, hey, you vote, please share, please share, please share, and it's completely saturated. But at the time, no one had done it. So within 24 hours, we became one of the top trending terms on Twitter. And I'll show you a brief bit from the Shorty Awards now, which actually the last one just occurred Monday. It's good timing, and we have a few Shorty Award judges in here, including David Berkowitz, who I believe is still in the back there, and very easily bribable. I think, what's your current bribe, David? I said the current rate to bribe you for a Shorty vote?
It doesn't take much now.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm cheap.
Cool, and so let me play you this quick clip from the Shorties, and then I'll dive back into it.
It's an award like an Oscar or a Nobel Peace Prize. Better, probably.
Broadway has the Tonys, Hollywood has the Oscars, and now social media has the Shorties.
I'll speak from the heart.
It's amazing. I love the Shorties.
The Shorties are by far the most prestigious.
It gives them the recognition they deserve.
We are so proud to be part of the Shorty Awards.
Today, I'm very honored to be here.
Thank you for honoring me with the Shorty Award.
Thank you for doing that. That was pretty cool.
Thanks to all the millions of people who tweeted nominations. There is not a more passionate fan base out there.
Yes, I have a 140-character speech.
Hashtag Shorty Awards.
Thank you, Shorty Awards. I cannot accept it alone. I share this Shorty with so many people, most especially the children who help make it possible.
Hey, honey, you know the Shorty Awards?
Yeah?
Jimmy Kimmel just won one.
What?
Oh, this is gonna be like the Oscars.
I would give that an award.
Thank you for this Shorty Award.
The Shorty Awards are underway.
From Twitter to Instagram to Vine.
This is not your typical awards show.
Why do you think you deserve a Shorty Award?
America's best social media users earn Shorty Awards each year.
But the Shorty Awards, baby! Red carpet!
You know, people that indulge in narcissistic behavior of talking out into the internet need to be acknowledged for that.
It's the events like the Shorty Awards that are continuing to inspire us.
Your creativity really is what gets us out of bed early every morning.
There is real journalism being done online.
This is the only award in my office that I actually display, and I'm just really proud of it.
Thank you very much. This means a lot to me.
It's the awards for tiny people, you know. It finally gives them the recognition they deserve, man. The past winners were Danny DeVito, Tom Cruise, Napoleon.
Thanks, Tess. That's the Shorty Awards in a nutshell. And when we did the first Shorty Awards, this was back late 2008, early 2009. So Twitter was still pretty young, but we saw very quickly, we got press coverage, inbound press from New York Times, Wall Street Journal, BBC, the kind of press you usually have to beg for when you launch something new. And that gave us this insight that journalists were really using Twitter early on in a way unlike most everybody else, which was they were using it to actually figure out what to write about. They were using it to figure out what to cover, and then also using it to share their news. From there, it led us to create Muck, which is now a platform both for journalists to create portfolios and also a platform for anyone who wants to reach journalists to connect with them, see what they're talking about, etc. With that, what I want to talk about today is a real focus on digging into what journalists, or how social media has kind of changed how journalists are creating their content, and focus on everything about how journalism changes how media goes through, rather than just what you should tweet or what you should post to your own brand page. So going from that, the big point here is that journalists, first of all, are using Twitter in a really in-depth way. And you'd heard stats before, probably that Facebook drives a lot more traffic, which is true, but we're going to kind of dig into numbers on this more soon. But it's Twitter where the journalists really are talking, communicating with each other, et cetera. This is results from a survey we did in partnership with Edelman, where we asked journalists how many times a day do they tweet. And we asked them, is it once a week, once a month, once a day, et cetera. The biggest response we get was snarky responses of saying only once a day. Are you kidding? It should be between once an hour or once a minute or several times a minute. But anyhow, 86% said they tweet several times a day. Even more interestingly, we asked them what's their primary social network that they use. And as you can see, over 75% said they use Twitter as their primary professional social network, whereas a much smaller percentage use Facebook, and then even smaller use LinkedIn, even though, as we know, Facebook's a much bigger social network. And I think in other professions, most people would say they use LinkedIn over Twitter as a professional profile. So we saw that Twitter is really what these journalists are using. Also, we asked them how many of them use Twitter to source their stories. And as you can see, 73% said they use Twitter and social media to actually get story ideas. Going from there, we asked them, do they like it when they're followed by people who are pitching them or sources of them? 93% said yes. And then what's really interesting now is even before stories are getting written, you can see what journalists are working on. So they'll post to Twitter, in this case, sometimes specifically asking for story ideas. My favorite view is seeing what stories journalists are working on before they publish. This is a great example where Farhad Manju, who is a tech columnist now for the Wall Street Journal, you can see he was tweeting to @UberWageWar, which is actually an anonymous Uber account, asking if he'd be willing to chat for a story. So if you're doing PR for Uber, guess what? You know before it's published that there's going to be a New York Times story about you citing anonymous sources from drivers, so you should probably get ready for that coming. And it's this kind of great view where Twitter kind of provides this water cooler now into what stories are going to be coming out in all mediums tomorrow. It's part of what we built into our platform too, letting people search for what journalists are talking about, what topics, across both what they post to Twitter and all their articles. So now, also going to talk about how social media has kind of changed the whole way journalists think about distributing news. It used to be that the journalist's job was to write the story. The journalist kind of had nothing to do with worrying about seeing if anyone is actually going to look at their article. Now that's all changed so that when you reach out to journalists, there's kind of this checklist you have to think about before you reach out to them. One is when you reach out to a journalist and you wanted to know why don't journalists take story ideas? We saw the number one reason was lack of personalization, that they'd get pitches from people that have nothing personalized in it, kind of no reason why it's applicable to them, and they don't follow it. Up next is too lengthy, and I'll get into that in a moment. Another one is we want to know what time should you reach out to journalists now? This is really bad news for anyone who isn't a morning person, like myself, which is that the majority of them want to be contacted between 9 and 11 a.m. A smaller group of them want to be contacted even earlier, 6 and 9 a.m., and taken together, the vast majority of journalists want to be pitched in the morning. How long do journalists want their pitches to be when they come in? We saw 60% want it to be 2 to 3 paragraphs. The next largest group, 36%, want 2 to 3 sentences. And you can see only a sliver want 500 words or 1,000 words. And I think this goes counter to kind of how a lot of people grew up in media, thinking about, okay, we got to get a press release out. Let's write this 500-word, 1,000-word press release with every detail of the story, and just blast it to lots of journalists. Now, when you have a press release come out, it's kind of old news the moment it comes out, and the journalists don't want to write about it anymore. So, communicating with journalists, it's all about keeping it short and figuring out how do you just pique their interest. Up next, a lot of people are like, okay, does this mean I now have to pitch everyone over Twitter? We find far and away journalists don't want to actually be pitched over social media. Over 90%, they want the pitch over email. So that's kind of very old-fashioned. If you can, now email, I guess, is the old-fashioned medium. But it's over email is how they want the pitch. But at the same time, over 90% also want to be followed by who's ever pitching them. So it's this kind of hybrid approach you have to take now where you want to follow the journalist and engage with them on social media, build a relationship on social media. But to actually pitch and communicate with them, you should be using email. And finally, journalists want their content to get shared. So we asked them what makes content shareable. The vast majority, 82%, said contains an image is what makes the article really shareable, followed that it's a subject that could be tied into a larger story. So it's another thing to think about when you're getting news out there. If you want people to care about your news, use a lot of images. We see it with the Shorty Awards, where we now invest in having at least 5 photographers roaming the ceremonies. So there are lots of photos, lots of visuals people who write about the Shorties can share, and usually it's a red carpet photo of a celebrity or somebody on stage. That makes it a great story. That's what the journalist knows gets shared. And now even more so because on Facebook especially, but also Twitter and all these other social platforms, when you drop a link in there, it shows the image from the link. So if you're still writing stories without images, it makes it much, much harder to get it out anywhere. And finally, the kind of eternal question for anyone who's ever emailed a journalist, or really anyone who's ever emailed anyone, is if you don't get a response, does that mean I've been rejected and I should go away and hide? And we find actually, most of the journalists we talk to say they're busy a lot of days, they're breaking news days. I thought it was great in the last panel talking about how sometimes you have your great tweet and it happens to be right after some big news event broke. So because of that, most journalists are actually fine with a follow-up. Over 70% are good with at least one follow-up. So if you do email out a story idea to a journalist, follow up on it if you don't hear back. We're going to do a quick case study just showing the real-time nature of how Twitter can kind of change how traditional news stories are worked and how it kind of falls in for sourcing. This was a case where I was searching Muck. I saw a CNET journalist who I didn't even know about before, Dan Tieterman, tweeted it basically, is anyone going to South by to promote a company? So I see that, and the timing is very important because you can look, this took place at 1:58. At 2:25, I just tweeted back at him, we're going there to show off Muck, very meta, love to talk. About half an hour after that, he asked me to email him. So you can see this kind of relationship is going through a technology devolution where it starts out with Twitter, with much more cutting edge. Now we're falling to email. I emailed him, then we set up a time to have a phone conversation. This is getting really old technology now. We do a phone interview, and then the next morning, I get the quote in CNET, all because we had this interplay over Twitter, then email, then phone. So it's just this appreciation where a lot of people say, no, we don't need social media. We need to get this in the paper. We need to get this on TV. But guess what? If you want to be in the newspaper, on TV, you now have to use social media to facilitate those interactions. And finally, once you do get press, again, for the journalist and for the company, that used to be the end of it, right? You got the article in the paper, nothing more you can do except for cut it out and mail it to your mom, or get it framed on your wall, or save it when you want to ask for your next raise. But now, the moment you get press, there's a lot to do. You have to get it shared, and the journalist wants to get it shared. And there are a few reasons you should get it shared. We asked how many journalists are under more pressure now to get their articles shared on social media than before. 76% said they're now under more pressure to get their articles shared. So if you have media and you want to get more media, the journalist is really going to care if that article does well and gets shared on social. So if you can get that article shared more on social, that journalist will want to cover you or cover your company or your news more in future. And if that article about you falls on deaf ears and nobody shares it, it's going to be harder for you to get coverage in the future. So how do you get it shared? One is when you do get an article placed anywhere on the web, not only should you try to share it, but enlist your entire company to share it, get your vendors to share it, get events you're sponsoring to share it. Anyone you can, ask them to share it. Try to make it easy for them to share. And then the more you can get it shared, the more the journalists will care about it. Now we want to talk about kind of how do you actually quantify this press? Again, going back to the last panel, a lot of talk about actually getting reports now. And reports are something that the marketing departments were always used to, but traditionally it was always hard for kind of that earned media for PR you get, for any kind of coverage you get naturally. But now there's a lot more data out there that you can use. One is we built a tool called whosharedmylink.com where you can just type in any article that's completely free. It'll tell you how many times it was shared on every social media platform. So I can pop in an article, it shows me how many times it was shared on every platform, and also what journalists shared it, what publications they're at, et cetera. And this new metric out there, share counts, is really revolutionary because up until now, up until recently, there was really no way to know how well an article did. You could get an article in the New York Times, page 10, but who the hell knew how many people actually read the paper and turned to page 10? Or it could be on TV and you'd have your general Nielsen ratings, but you wouldn't know how many people are actually tuned in to this channel at this time. But now, and then with the web, actually, we had more data, right? Because you always had the hits data, which is junk, but then you had unique visitors and page views, which are actually a credible metric, but it wasn't public. So you could have your article in the New York Times, and the New York Times would know how many people actually read that article, but they didn't share that data, definitely with you or with competitors. And oftentimes they wouldn't even share that data with their own journalists. Only the analytics department and then the publisher would have that data. Whereas now with this social share data, this data about how many times articles were shared on every social site is definitely not perfect, but it's the first time we've ever had a universal public metric. So you can look at, we can look at for the Shorty Awards, hey, we got 100 press hits, but now let's analyze which press hits actually got shared the most, and we can look at that across competitors. Also, if you're a journalist, you can now see, hey, I wrote about this topic, and so did my nemesis at my rival publication, and we can compare who got more shares on our stories. So it gives you this powerful relative number that you can break down publication by publication. Aside from that, too, you can dig in further. You can then look at everyone who's sharing a story. So not only do you know, hey, we got 100 shares on this article, but you can look in and see who's sharing it. So I dug in here, and I saw this was an article I wrote talking about, actually in a meta way, talking about how PR is being changed by social share data. And then I saw that I reached someone who's a social strategist at the Clark production. So I saw like, hey, I'm actually getting to the right audience. It's not just a random audience of people that I'm reaching. Of course, you can look at views too. Only a few publications now make that public. Here's Business Insider and Forbes, but those that do make it public, that gives you another metric to go by. Compete gives you unique visitor data. We pull that into our reports, and you can pull it in from a variety of places too, but it gives you an estimate of the reach of different publications. Again, not perfect, but it gives you another data point. And then also looking at the Twitter performance, this is a great kind of secret of Twitter, which is on their ads platform at ads.twitter.com. You can get much better analytic data than you can just using the Twitter app, yet you can access that data without needing to spend even a dime on Twitter advertising. So even if you have no media budget, I'd really suggest going to ads.twitter.com and checking out their analytics platform to give you for free. Same with Facebook. You can dig into the articles you post there, how much reach did it get, and even better, when you do have the article, you can look at who's actually shared it. So this was a post we made, and I checked out who liked it, and I found the actual name and title of the person sharing it, so you can get this kind of sampling of and get a sense for like not only how many shares you're getting, but are you reaching the right people? So with that, I'd like to kind of just sum it up that now social media has kind of changed the whole process of how you have to play the media game. It's changed how you're going to reach out to journalists, how you're going to try to get stories placed in the media or get a quote in the media, influence what's going to be in the media the next day. It's changed how you have to kind of monitor and react. And then finally, it's changed how you report on your media and how you have to follow up after you get a story, be it in TV, the newspaper, or online. Thank you.